The Nekuia, the journey to the Underworld. For a year, the great hero Odysseus, son of Laertes, had remained captive, not by chains, but by the enchantments of the beautiful and terrible sorceress Circe. Yet, the splendor of her palace and the sweetness of her wine could not extinguish the fiery longing for his rocky homeland, Ithaca, and his faithful wife, Penelope. One evening, as the shadows lengthened and the wine flowed, his crew, having gathered their courage, approached their king. Eurylochus. "Noble Odysseus, have you forgotten Ithaca? Forgotten the son you left as a babe? The time for lingering has passed. We must depart, even if the sea swallows us whole." Odysseus felt the truth of their plea pierce his heart like an arrow. He rose from his silver-inlaid couch and strode to Circe, who was weaving at her golden loom. Odysseus. "Circe, divine one, you promised my release. My heart and the hearts of my men can bear this waiting no longer. We must sail for home." Circe, whose eyes held the secrets of the moon and the stars, ceased her weaving. A mournful yet knowing smile touched her lips. "Circe, son of Laertes, you are truly a man forged for misery. You wish to depart, but you must know that the path home is not the one you desire. No man alive can guide you now." Circe then revealed the horrifying truth. Their path must first lead to the very gates of the dead. "Circe, before you may tread the soil of Ithaca, you must seek the wisdom of the dead. You must journey to the furthest shore of the world, where the sun never shines, and descend into the gloomy house of Hades and Persephone." Odysseus. "To Hades, lady? Must I die twice before reaching home? Who among the shadows holds the power to advise a living man?" Circe. "The blind prophet of Thebes, Tiresias. He alone, even in death, retains the wisdom and discernment granted to him by the gods. He will tell you of your voyage, the dangers that lie ahead, and the manner of your final return." A chill, far colder than the sea wind, swept over Odysseus. He sat down and wept, overcome by despair. This was a trial beyond even the horrors of Troy. As dawn broke, Odysseus gathered his men and announced the chilling destination. Terror gripped them. They groaned, tearing at their hair, realizing the depths of the peril awaiting them. Amidst the fear and chaos, one small tragedy occurred, a grim prelude to the journey ahead. Elpenor, the youngest of the crew, a man more devoted to wine than to warcraft, had fallen asleep on the roof of Circe's house the previous night, intoxicated. Startled by the tumultuous sound of his comrades preparing the ship, Elpenor sprang up. Forgetting the long ladder, he stumbled over the edge, plunging headlong. His neck snapped, and his soul fled to the realm of the dead, while his companions, rushing to depart, knew nothing of his demise. Odysseus, driven by the urgency of Circe's instructions, began loading the necessary provisions: the black ram and the black ewe, the required sacrifices for the shades. Odysseus. "Ready the masts. Circe has provisioned us and sent a fair wind. We waste no time mourning what is lost. The dead wait for us at the world's end." Before they sailed, Circe appeared one last time, imparting the sacred and terrible instructions for the ritual, the Nekuia. "Circe, listen well, son of Laertes. When your ship reaches the shores of the Cimmerians, where mist and night dwell perpetually, you must beach the ship by the grove of Persephone, poplars and willows that shed no fruit. Circe, there by the confluence of the two rivers, Pyriphlegethon, the river of fire, and Cocytus, the river of wailing, you must dig a trench, an arm's length long and wide. Around this trench pour your libations. First, honey mixed with milk, then sweet wine, and finally, water sprinkled with white barley meal. Circe. Then sacrifice the black ram and the black ewe. Turn their heads toward Erebus, and yourself look toward the river of ocean. Let the blood stream down into the trench. Circe, the countless shades of the dead will gather, drawn by the scent of the living blood. But hold your ground. Keep them back with your sharp sword. Do not permit any shade to approach the blood until you see the prophet Tiresias. He must drink first, and then he will speak truly." With these daunting words, Circe disappeared. Odysseus ordered his men to hoist the sail, and soon a strong guiding north wind filled their canvas. The ship flew over the grey sea, bearing them towards the west, towards the land where the sun sleeps. The crew sailed the entire day and night. They passed islands and shores known to men, but their destination was beyond the maps of the living. Finally, they reached the limits of the deep-flowing Oceanus, the river that encircles the world. Here the air itself changed. The sun, which had guided them fiercely, was utterly vanquished. Odysseus: "We entered the land of the Cimmerians. Perpetual mist and darkness cloaked the entire realm. The sun, that life-giving light, never looked upon them, neither when climbing the starry sky, nor when wheeling back to earth. A single, dreary night holds fast this miserable people." The men, accustomed to the bright Aegean, shivered not just from the cold, but from the oppressive, heavy darkness that pressed in on all sides. Crewman: "My king, I can see nothing. No star, no shore, only the shadow of death ahead." Odysseus, guided only by the memory of Circe's words and his own indomitable will, ordered the ship beached. They stumbled onto the black beach, a land of perpetual gloom. They found the desolate grove of poplars and the junction of the fabled rivers, their sounds a chilling symphony of woe. Odysseus, taking the lead, began the dreadful ritual. He commanded his men to dig the trench according to Circe's exact specifications. Odysseus: "I held my sword firmly and spoke a prayer to the multitudes of the dead. I vowed that upon my return to Ithaca, I would sacrifice a barren cow in my halls and heap the pyre with gifts. And to Tiresias alone, I promised a single jet-black ram, the finest of my flock." He poured the sacred libations, milk and honey, wine, water and barley, each substance a fragile link between the world of the living and the realm of shadows. Now came the moment of ultimate sacrifice. Odysseus took the ram and the ewe, both creatures of the deepest black, and slit their throats above the trench. The warm, life-giving blood, the power that would momentarily tether the dead to the world of the living, gushed into the chasm. Odysseus: As the dark blood began to pool, the air itself seemed to shudder. From the blackness, a terrible low moan arose, the collective sigh of 10,000 departed souls. The first to rise were the forms of the young, the recently dead. Brides who never saw their wedding morn, youth struck down by arrows, old men worn by labor, and beautiful maidens lost to sickness. They came flying toward the trench, drawn by the irresistible power of the blood, crying in thin, unnatural voices. Odysseus: My terror was immense, but I held fast to my purpose. I drew my heavy bronze sword, planted my feet, and stood guard over the trench. I would not allow a single, screaming shade to taste the blood before the prophet Tiresias arrived. The multitude surged, but Odysseus's sword held them back. Then one spirit pressed forward, known to him, yet unrecognized at first in the pallor of death. It was the wretched soul of Elpenor, his young crewman, still bearing the look of bewilderment from his accidental fall. Odysseus: Elpenor, my comrade, how did you come to this sorrowful place ahead of the swift ship? Were you cursed by the gods? Did the sea claim you? Elpenor's spirit, having seen his king, began to wail, his voice a ghost of its former self. Elpenor: Odysseus, son of Laertes, king of Ithaca, do not forget me. I met a dreadful fate in the house of Circe. I was careless, and death found me. We left my body, unwept, unburied, a forgotten thing. Elpenor, by your life and your wife and your son, I beg you, when you return to Aea, remember my body. Burn my corpse with all my armor, and heap up a burial mound for me. Plant my oar, the oar I used in life, upon the barrow as a monument to my miserable sailing. Odysseus, heartbroken and shamed by his oversight, swore the sacred oath. Odysseus, poor spirit, I shall perform all these rites for you, as is the due of a comrade and a friend. The promise made, Elpenor's soul receded into the swirling throng, awaiting his king's return to the world of the living. Odysseus stood alone, guarding the sacred blood, watching the dark chaos of the underworld intensify, waiting for the arrival of the blind prophet. His true trial had just begun. Odysseus stood rigid by the trench, his mighty bronze sword pressed against the rushing horde of the dead. The scent of the dark sacrificial blood was an irresistible magnet, drawing all the restless souls who longed for a fleeting memory of life. Odysseus. A million faces swam in the gloom, their voices a continuous terrible wail that chilled my blood. They pushed, they shoved, vying to taste the warmth that was now denied to them. I stood like a rock in a stormy sea, my resolve forged by Circe's warning. No shade shall drink until Tiresias speaks. The air grew heavy with the desperation of the unburied and the unacknowledged dead. Suddenly, one distinct voice pierced the chorus, the voice of Elpenor. Elpenor. My king, you have promised. Now you must let me pass. My soul cannot rest until my rites are done. I cannot join the silent company until my oar marks my grave. Odysseus. Have patience, dear friend. My promise stands, but I am sworn to a higher command. The prophet must come first. Hold fast to your spirit until I return to Aea. Elpenor's shade retreated, but his mournful presence intensified the hero's isolation. After what seemed like an eternity, the chaos momentarily subsided. A new figure approached, walking not with the frantic rush of the other shades, but with quiet, deliberate dignity. It was the spirit of Tiresias, the blind seer, his sightless eyes holding an ancient, deep wisdom. Odysseus. Welcome, prophet. By the grace of Persephone, I have dared this dreadful journey. Come, drink the sacred blood, and grant me the truth of my return. Odysseus stepped aside. Tiresias bent over the trench. As the shade drank the dark, vital fluid, his form seemed to solidify, and his voice regained its commanding resonance. Tiresias, son of Laertes, wise Odysseus, why have you abandoned the sunlight to gaze upon the misery of the dead? A harsh road lies before you, decreed by the earthshaker Poseidon. Tiresias, know this, the mighty god of the sea is enraged because you blinded his son, the Cyclops. He will harass you and your comrades. Yet even in this, you may still prevail, if you master your own passions and those of your foolish crew. Tiresias continued the terrifying prophecy, detailing the single greatest peril. Tiresias, your next critical stop will be the island of Thrinacia, the home of the flocks and herds of the sun god Hyperion, Helios. These cattle are sacred and countless. They neither breed nor die. Tiresias, if you can manage to control your crew, if you leave those herds utterly untouched, you may yet see Ithaca, though you will suffer greatly. But if any man, even you, lays violent hands upon those blessed beasts, your ship and crew will be destroyed. Tiresias, you alone will survive the subsequent wrath, and you will return to your home late, afflicted, stripped of all your comrades, and upon a stranger's ship. Odysseus listened, his heart heavy. The burden of his men's weakness now lay upon his own shoulders. The prophet shifted his focus from the sea to the hero's own hearth. Tiresias, when you return, you will find a house overrun. Insolent men, the suitors, are devouring your wealth and wooing your wife. You must return in secrecy, unrecognized, enduring insults and malice. Tiresias, you must devise a skillful plan to slaughter them all, to take vengeance for the ruin they have wrought in your hall. And finally, the prophet spoke of the hero's quiet, distant end, the ultimate appeasement of Poseidon. Tiresias, once the halls are cleansed, you must take a well-shaped oar and journey overland. Travel until you reach a people who know nothing of the sea, who call the oar a winnowing fan. There you must plant the oar and sacrifice a ram, a bull, and a boar to Poseidon. Only then will his rage be completely appeased.
Tiresias,
After that, you will return home and live out your years. Death will come to you, not from the sea, but gently from the ocean, striking you when you are worn out with sleek old age. All your people shall be prosperous around you. With the final words spoken, the prophet stepped back, his form shimmering. Tiresias, the truth is yours, Odysseus. Now stand firm and permit the next shade to drink. As Tiresias faded back into the dark throng, a woman's shade immediately pressed forward. Odysseus looked upon her and gasped, his composure shattered. It was his own mother, Nekuia. Odysseus, my God, mother, I did not know you were among the dead. I left you alive when I sailed for Troy. Did some terrible fate overtake you? Or did the long grief for my absence consume your life? He desperately restrained her with his sword. Odysseus, hold, do not approach the blood yet. I must first speak with the prophet, as the goddess commanded. He waited until Tiresias was fully gone before allowing his mother to drink. As she did, her shade gained clarity and recognition returned to her face. Nekuia, "Oh, my son, my brave, sorrowful boy, I have not come from a swift plague, nor did the archer goddess Artemis strike me down with her painless arrows. Nekuia, it was only the heavy longing for you, my Odysseus, for your wisdom, for your return, that took my sweet life from me. The endless waiting broke my heart." She spoke of the home he desperately longed for. Nekuia, your wife, Penelope, remains in your halls, enduring her lonely days with a heart full of sorrow. She keeps your treasure and cares for your son, Telemachus. He tends your estates, but his life is plagued by the insolent suitors. Nekuia, the burden of your mother is now lifted, but yours is just beginning. Be strong. Odysseus was overwhelmed. He reached out to embrace her, to hold the phantom of the woman who birthed him. Odysseus, mother, let me embrace you, let me clasp your hand, that even in Hades we may find comfort. 3 times he tried to grasp her. 3 times her spirit slipped through his arms like smoke, eluding his touch. Nekuia, the strength has fled, my son. This is the way of the dead. Our bodies, once consumed by the pyre, are lost. Only the image remains. But go now, remember all that you have seen here, and share it with your wife when you return to the light. With his mother's passing, a great host of women gathered, drawn by the news that a living man stood there. They were the shades of famous wives and daughters of heroes, and they approached the trench one by one. Odysseus, intrigued and seeking further counsel, allowed them to drink and tell their tales. Odysseus, I saw Tyro, who was beloved by Poseidon, Antiope, who bore Zeus 2 sons, and Leda, the mother of the Dioscuri and the infamous Helen. I saw Phaedra and Procris, women whose fame rests upon the tragedies of their loves and betrayals. This parade of women served as a grim lesson. Life, even for the noblest, is often ruled by passion, chance, and heartbreak. As the women's shades melted away, the next figure to emerge was colossal and terrible. Agamemnon, Lord of Men, supreme commander of the Achaeans at Troy, brutally murdered upon his return home. Agamemnon drank the blood, his face a mask of bitter rage and sorrow. Agamemnon: Odysseus, what dreadful fortune brings you here? I thought you were happy in Ithaca, but alas, you too are caught in the web of the gods. Odysseus recounted his own endless wanderings. Agamemnon then poured out the full, dreadful story of his death at the hands of his wife, Clytemnestra, and her lover, Aegisthus. Agamemnon: She prepared a vile feast for me, welcoming me with false sweetness. Then, as I lay unarmed in the bath, she and her lover stabbed me like an ox in the stall. They killed me, and she did not even close my eyes or mouth. His counsel to Odysseus was a poison born of his trauma. Never trust a woman again. Agamemnon: Take this warning to heart, Odysseus. Do not be fully open even with your own wife. Tell her only half the truth, keeping the rest concealed. Trust no woman fully, for their treachery is endless. Agamemnon: The best day for a man is the day he returns home and finds his children waiting. But for me, my wife planned my death. Odysseus, deeply troubled by the great general's venomous advice, began to understand that the greatest dangers might not lie on the open sea, but in the deceptive comfort of one's own halls. Having received the bitter counsel of Agamemnon, Odysseus stepped back from the trench. Immediately, the spirit of Achilles, the swift-footed, greatest warrior of the Trojan War, strode forward. With him were the shades of his comrades, Patroclus, Antilochus, and the colossal Ajax. Achilles drank the blood, and his ghostly form regained the grandeur that had terrorized Troy. Achilles: Son of Laertes, what greater deed do you attempt now? How did you dare descend to Hades, where the shades of men dwell, soulless, mindless beings? Were you driven here by the gods, or by some impossible quest? Odysseus, humbled before the memory of his greatest ally, spoke words of consolation. Odysseus: Achilles, son of Peleus, greatest of the Achaeans, I came here seeking the prophecy of Tiresias, but I consider no man more blessed than you. When you lived, we Argives honored you like a god, and now you rule supremely among the dead. Do not mourn your death, noble one. Achilles' response was the most famous and devastating declaration of the entire Nekuia, a profound rejection of fame in the face of death. Achilles: Do not gloss over death to me, glorious Odysseus. I would rather be a serf, toiling the soil for some landless man, a pauper with meager earnings, than be a king over all these exhausted dead. He turned his attention immediately to the world of the living. Achilles: Tell me of my father, Peleus. Does he still hold his royal state, or does he suffer insult because old age grips him? And tell me of my son, Neoptolemus. Is he growing up in wisdom and valor, or has some weakling seized his inheritance? Odysseus reassured the hero, recounting the magnificent bravery of Neoptolemus in the final battles of Troy. He described the young man's ferocity and wise counsel. Odysseus: He never flinched, even when facing the fiercest warriors. He was the greatest fighter after yourself, renowned for both strength and cunning. At the sound of his son's great deeds, the shade of Achilles turned and stalked away with long, rapid strides, visibly joyful that his son carried his legend forward. Next, the great shadow of Ajax, son of Telamon, slowly approached. Ajax was second only to Achilles in strength, but had been driven to suicide after losing the contest for Achilles' armor to Odysseus himself. The wound of that humiliation remained raw and eternal. Ajax paused, silent, glowering from the shadows. Odysseus. Ajax, son of Telamon, even in death, your great wrath cannot be forgotten. You chose to die because of the arms of Achilles, the loss of which the gods decreed for the ruin of us all. Come, noble one, set aside your rage and speak to me. Let the fury that consumed you fade even here in the house of Hades. The multitude of shades gasped, sensing the historical tension between the two titans. But Ajax gave no reply. He turned away, his silence a deep and cutting rejection of Odysseus's apology and plea for understanding. He walked off into the Elysian fields, the realm reserved for the most glorious heroes. Odysseus. His heart remained bitter, unforgiving even in the afterlife. Though I longed to speak to him, to appeal to his sorrowful spirit, I could not force him. He was perhaps the only soul I encountered who would not be swayed by the power of the blood, so profound was his grudge. Odysseus stood for a moment, contemplating the power of eternal, self-inflicted pain. He realized that the anger he sparked among the living could follow a man beyond the grave. Odysseus decided he had seen enough of the great heroes and the victims of fate. He moved away from the trench, taking a deep breath of the spectral air, and looked into the deeper chasms of Hades where the great criminals were punished. He saw Minos, the son of Zeus, sitting in judgment over the dead, dispensing justice with a golden scepter. He also saw the great hunter Orion, now hunting the shades of wild beasts across the asphodel fields, forever practicing his craft. But his attention was quickly drawn to the souls suffering perpetual torment, the legendary figures whose crimes offended the very foundations of the gods. The first and most pitiful was Tantalus. He stood immersed in a lake whose water lapped at his chin. Odysseus. The poor man was tormented by an unending, agonizing thirst. Whenever he bent down, desperate to drink, the water would recede, vanishing into the black earth beneath him. The pool of water mocked his need. Above his head hung trees laden with the richest fruits, pears, pomegranates, apples, and ripe figs, waving temptingly in the ghostly breeze. Odysseus. But whenever Tantalus stretched out his hand to pluck a piece, the branches would be snatched up by the wind, soaring into the dark clouds. He was eternally close to relief, yet eternally deprived of it. A terrible, fitting punishment for his ancient crime against the gods. Next, Odysseus saw Sisyphus, the most cunning of men, condemned to an eternal, futile labor for his impiety and trickery against the gods. Odysseus. I saw him wrestling with an enormous rock. He used both hands and his entire body, straining with all his might, pushing the boulder up the steep slope of a hill. With grunts and immense effort, Sisyphus would slowly reach the summit, believing his task was complete. Odysseus. But just as he was about to heave it over the crest, the sheer weight of the boulder, propelled by the unseen forces of fate, would turn it back. The relentless rock would thunder down the hill to the plain below, forcing Sisyphus to begin his futile, endless toil anew. The image of this relentless, meaningless struggle filled Odysseus with a cold dread. He saw in Sisyphus a reflection of the endless, unyielding tasks imposed by the gods. Odysseus knew his time in the realm of the dead had run out. He had acquired the prophecy of Tiresias, offered solace to his mother, and witnessed the final judgments of heroes and criminals. He looked around, hoping to see the last great hero, Heracles, and for a moment he saw the faint, ghostly image of the hero, though he was unsure if it was truly Heracles or merely his eidolon. However, the sheer presence of the multitude of the dead began to overwhelm him. The endless ranks of souls, recognizing him as the only living man, started to surge forward again, their unified, chilling roar growing louder and more desperate than before. Odysseus. The vast hordes of the dead swarmed around me, pressing in with a collective, eerie shriek. My blood ran cold. I feared that at any moment Persephone herself might send up a Gorgon's head, some terrifying monster to turn me to stone or keep me forever in that gloom. Without hesitation, the hero retreated. He ran to his ship and commanded his men. Odysseus: "To the ship! Now, men! We are done here! Cast off the ropes! Get us out of this house of death!" His men scrambled to the oars, terrified by their king's alarm. They pushed the galley back into the river Oceanus. A favoring current and the strong, desperate rhythm of their oars carried them away from the shores of eternal night. They rowed fiercely until they left the perpetual gloom behind and emerged back into the sunlit realm of the sea. The descent was over. Odysseus, the lonely survivor, had faced the darkness and returned, burdened with prophecy and sorrow, but armed with the knowledge necessary to complete his journey home.